Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Quick question before we do start the video. Has anybody seen the Entwives? We've been searching for them. They're not dead. They're just, we just lost them. Fangorn is looking for them desperately. So if you do have any information surrounding the Entwives, please let us know. Anyways, let's go over Fangorn Tree Shepherd. He is a 7-mana commander, Treefolk. Treefolk you control have vigilance whenever one or more Treefolk you control attack, add twice that much green mana. You don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end. This is looking to be a pretty sweet Treefolk commander, mainly because you can store a lot of mana with Fangorn. With all that mana, you could send a giant army to Isenguard with Fangorn by casting a bunch of different Treefolk. And yes, if you haven't guessed it yet, we are playing Treefolk Tribal. This is going to be a complete Treefolk Tribal deck, along with some other thematic choices. Speaking of thematic choices, let's discuss them. So I know I'm cheating a little bit when I'm mentioning these characters, but of course we have to have Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took because they are part of the story with Treefolks. They convince Fangorn, or should I say Treebeard, to take on Saruman in his fortress. Whenever Meriadoc attacks, you can make a food token, and on top of that, if one or more food tokens would enter the battlefield with Peregrine, you'd make an additional food instead. You could also sacrifice 3 foods to draw a card if you don't want to gain that life. So you can store a bunch of food so that you can draw a bunch of cards later. Speaking of food, we do also have Generous Ent. It enters the battlefield making a food token. It also does have forest cycling, just in case if you're in the early game and you do need mana, you could forest cycle Generous Ent. I did also want to bring up another legendary Ent with Quick Beam Upstart Ent. Whenever it or another Treefolk enters the battlefield under your control, up to 2 target creatures get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. What a great effect for your Ents. I did also want to bring up the long list of Ents, mainly because I don't know about you, if you ever read the books, you kind of notice that these are really long chapters, and I kind of have a hard time reading through them. This is more for thematic reasons, not so much tribal reasons, so it may be one you may not want to consider, but I thought I would include it. I did also want to bring up this absolutely insane card with the Last March of the Ents. This is absolutely incredible. For 8 mana, the spell can't be countered, and you draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control that put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Speaking from movie terms, this is one of the most impactful parts of the movie with the Last March of the Ents, so it's incredible that they visualized it right here and made it an absolute powerhouse of a card. Even though it is 8 mana, Treebeard will provide a lot of mana if we do have him on the battlefield. Other than that, we do want to have some great support cards that you may want to consider in the deck, mainly so that we can get your Treefolk out as soon as possible so that we can start smashing Isengard. So we do have quick ramp enchantments like Burgeoning and Exploration, so for 1 mana, you could either get lands whenever an opponent plays a land on the battlefield, or you could get an extra land drop with Exploration. Let's also take a look at Tribute to the World Tree. So for 3 mana, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card if its power is 3 or greater. Otherwise, you put 2 1/1 counters on it. So a lot of our Treefolks are going to be high power and high toughness. So most cases, we're going to be drawing cards. In other cases, if we do have smaller creatures entering the battlefield, we'll put 1/1 counters on them, making them bigger. Another card I did want to suggest to you is Wrenn and 7, mainly because we could get a lot of lands from our library, and on top of that, we could ramp ahead if we do have a lot of lands in our hand. On top of that, you can make a Treefolk token on the battlefield if you'd like, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. And lastly, we have a fun removal piece with Lignify. So for 2 mana, enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a Treefolk with base power and toughness 0/4. With some of those cards mentioned, I do mainly want to focus on the Ents. Those are the big factors of what we want to do. We want to make sure Treefolk is the big focus of the deck. So I'm going to go over a couple of Treefolk like Eudora Grave Gardener, mainly because whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land. This is pretty symbolic, mainly because when your Treefolk are dying, they're coming back to the earth and making more forest for you to tap for. A couple other suggestions I have for you is Treefolk Harbinger, as well as Bosk Banneret. it. One will give you a tutor for a Treefolk or a Forest card, another will make your Treefolk spells and Shaman spells cost one less to play, so this provides great value overall in your game plan when playing with Treefolk. I did also want to bring up Verladolf the Ancient. It does have kicker, you can make a big army of green sapling creature tokens on the battlefield, and on top of that it is a great anthem for them and Treefolk you do control. However, I do feel like Timber Protector is absolutely one of the best Treefolk you could put into a Treefolk tribal deck. Other Treefolk creatures you control get +1/+1, and other Treefolk and forests you control are indestructible. And with this next card not technically being a Treefolk, we do have Zopandrel Hunger Dominus. I like this mainly because you can double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. This is an incredible game ender. I played this card so many times in different games and seen great results with him ending the game and winning. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Fangorn Tree Shepherd. I do feel like Fangorn Tree Shepherd is an absolute beast and a house of a commander mainly for Treefolk tribal. Also having that ability to store mana so that you could spend for bigger spells later on is absolutely incredible. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Fangorn Tree Shepherd? Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.